No, I'll tell you, my take on the Benjamin Fulford thing is I first became aware of him way back in 2007 when he kind of went off the range from being the financial reporter for Forbes and started talking about this White Dragon Society and how that the secret society over in China was fed up with the New World Order and that they were going to take steps to see that they changed their ways, or they were going to send all these ninja assassins after them. And I'm just thinking, what? Where's this guy coming from, And he was talking about how that they were going to take down the World Economic Order, et cetera, et cetera. But then going on through 2008, the big economic meltdown, and coming right on up till today, where we've had now more than 400 resignations by prominent bankers and money managers, in the world financial system. It's like, wait a minute, something's going on, and we're certainly not being told the truth about it. So I don't know. I guess Fulford may have it as right as anybody else.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I can't. You're not having spent a lot of time studying what he has to say. I wouldn't put it on a shelf until I can.
Right. We're just going to have to sit back and watch. It's I don't. What I call it, Ken, is I put it in my file. You go, huh.
Well, I
set it aside, and then keep watching to see if more information comes in.
Right. I remember one time I was quoted in USA Today, and I was like reading this quote of mine, and then on the next page, it was this full page ad for a group that was advertising the next level of human evolution, and it was this long, very interesting rant about how it was time for mankind to evolve to the next step. And Steam Shovel Press never solicited advertising. If people came to me and wanted to take out an ad, still true. If they want to take out an ad, I'll be happy to sell them one. But I never solicited one. But I read this rant. I thought that was pretty wild. And so I wrote, and I said, I bet you my readers would be interested in these people. And so I wrote to them, and I said, would you like to take an ad out? And they did. And turned out to be Marshall Applewhite.
Uh-oh. So, come on, we're all going in the ship.
Yeah, so just as a precautionary measure, you do have to keep your mind open, but you also have to, be careful.
Well, you have to be like my wife describes me as having one foot on ground earth and the other foot, squarely in midair. So, you have to keep an open mind, but not so open that your brains fall out.
Exactly right. Yeah.
All right, here's one for you. Do you think there was any one reason that JFK was killed?
Oh, well, again, my current book, JFK and UFO, which is published by Feral House, by the way, and also if you want to find out anything about what I'm doing, steamshovelpress.com is where to go. But this theory emphasizes the idea that Kennedy was shot because of the contractual dispute between General Dynamics and Boeing, and that the triggerman was in the employ of Boeing, and that was Fred Krisman. And so it was basically a product of the military-industrial complex. And what happened after that was that in the last speech of his life, JFK was discussing what we were talking about before, the Tactical Fighter Experimental, the TFX, which later became the F-111, which created a funding corridor which led to the development of Pine Gap, the Australian Area 51. And if you refocus on Area 51 and you understand that Oswald served in Japan where the U-2s flew out of, defected to the Soviet Union and gave them the information they needed to shoot down Gary Powers' U-2, worked at Jagger Child Stovall, the U-2 photographic firm before getting the job at the Book Depository. If you understand that Oswald was a spy connected to the U-2 program and that the U-2 was developed at Area 51, the Area 51 Pine Gap link, the whole picture of the military science fiction nightmare, the military-industrial complex, is what I'm trying to put forth in JFK and UFO. So if you want a single answer, that big overblown one I just gave you is what I have for you.
And I might add that the TFX, which became the F-111, was produced by General Dynamics in Fort Worth, Texas, where JFK was making the final talk of his life and career that morning prior to heading for Dallas.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm sorry, just as a footnote, I just recently did an essay that appears in Adam Gorightly's new book. It's called Happy Trails from High Weirdness or whatever. But I discussed this other television program that I recently came across. Route 66. Do you remember Route 66?
Route 66, sure.
Exactly. There's an episode where the guys, it opens up at Love Field, and the two guys get a job at the Trade Mart. And at one point, one of the characters is talking to Earl Cabell on the telephone. But it's 1962.
Wow.
It's the year before the Kennedy assassination.
Well, that's kind of like the guy who did the X-Files, Carter, who's
Chris Carter, right?
Chris Carter.
Right. Chris Carter.
In March of 2001, months before 9/11, they aired a spinoff of the X-Files called The Lone Gunman.
The Lone Gunman, yeah, sure.
Yeah, and in this episode, a spook faction within the military-industrial complex used computers to override the onboard computer of a commercial airliner, making it look like it had been hijacked, and they were going to fly it into the World Trade Center tower to get their budgets increased and blame it on terrorists from the Middle East.
Right. Well,
hello? Maybe didn't they tell us exactly what was going to happen?
Well, precisely. And in that very show, the computer program is called the Octium chip, as in the octopus.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
it has a backdoor capacity just like the Promise software out of the Octopus book.
Exactly. They knew what they were talking about. You guys, you people out there need to pay more attention to the fictional movies and TV shows, because these guys, hey, it's under total control, but the writers are smart guys, and sometimes they throw in some things that are actually true.
Oh, yeah.
This brings us to another question for you, Ken. This is going to be an interesting one. I think, first off, just a yes or no. Was Marilyn Monroe murdered? Yes or no?
Yes.
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 And I agree. All right,
Yeah,
so we agree that Marilyn Monroe was murdered. She didn't die of just an innocent drug overdose. Now, the question is, it seems like there's evidence pointing to the JFK forces. Robert Kennedy was there in her home that afternoon, apparently left with some stuff. And
Right.
then you've got the anti-JFK forces, the mob and the people who didn't want, and the CIA who didn't want her talking about maybe things she had heard in pillow talk between the Kennedy brothers. So which do you think was behind her murder? The pro-Kennedy people or the anti-Kennedy people?
I have a story about this, actually, Jim. I was invited on a program called Kevin Nealon was the host. It was a conspiracy something or the other. It was a panel show where they discussed a conspiracy topic, a different conspiracy topic every week, and there were three panelists this week. What was the name of that show? Conspiracy something with Kevin Nealon, the guy who was on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, I vaguely remember that, and I can't think of the name of it. I think I have a hat from them. I think I was on there and they gave me a hat.
Right. Okay, well, the show I was on was the Marilyn Monroe show. And there were three people on there. There was Jonathan Vankin, the guy that did the Greatest Conspiracies book, and he was making the argument that it was the mob. There was an actress named Leanne Walters who was trying to say that it was a suicide. She was like a Marilyn Monroe wannabe herself. And then there was me. And I came on with something called the Spiriglio document, which was by this detective who that was supposedly a transcript of pillow talk between Marilyn and Robert Kennedy, and where she was saying that JFK had taken her to the desert base to see the things from outer space. And the date on that memo was like the day before she died. So I was making the case that she was actually killed by MJ-12, which, is probably a pretty hairball case, although, I'm saying there's something to that. But I was the only person who brought documentation.
There you go. Yeah, that was interesting. That Spiriglio note was really fascinating because this was in the summer of '62, and when she was talking about things that she had learned from Kennedy, and one of the things was the fact that there were missiles in Cuba. Well, nobody knew about that until later in the fall, October, when the Cuban Missile Crisis came up. but she's talking about it in August of 62. But what's really fascinating is you're right. She said Kennedy was talking to her about viewing things from space at a secret air base, and she put that was number one. That was the first thing she's going to talk about. Never mind the missiles in Cuba.
Right, and then boom, she's dead like the next day.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Okay, now here's a chance for you to plug for your book again.
Okay.
We got a question here. Said, was there a UFO JFK assassination connection?
Well, yeah. I mean, the title of the book is JFK and UFO. And again, it's Feral House, Feral House.com. Or to find out about all the different things, I've got like 4 or 5 different contributions to books and so forth out there. Go to steamshovelpress.com. But there's kind of what you might call the vulgar view that Kennedy was killed because he was going to tell the truth about the Roswell crash. And then there's my view that the whole UFO phenomenon is tied up with our existence here inside the military-industrial complex. And it has to do with just ordinary Earth people and Americans being critical of the military establishment and being fearful, maybe, and paranoid a bit about how our culture has developed and how all these real connections do kind of connect up to actual mysteries that we still don't understand and that they're still kind of scary. So yes, of course, there's a direct link between JFK and UFOs.
Right. It's all one big ball of wax.
That's right.
And that's why the famous and infamous they, who they did it and they are keeping things from us and they are hiding information. Well, this is why they're having a hard time, because you start pulling on one thread and the whole ball starts coming unraveled, right, Ken?
Absolutely right. Yes, and it's done so for many, many people, and it's kind of strange that that whole mainstream reality tunnel is still kind of trucks along. Although every year I think more and more people are pulling at those threads. You're saying and beginning to understand that there's that the emperor has no clothes.
Well, I just read that CNN has lost like almost 50% of their listenership.
Precisely.
So people aren't buying it anymore. They realize that
and the dumb show, the MSNBC and Fox News dumb show, I mean, that can't hold for very long.
That's why they're pushing for the Cybersecurity Act of 2012 or whatever. They got to start locking down the internet because that's where everybody's getting their information from.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
It's amazing. All right, here we go. Do you guys believe the letter written by Mrs. Kennedy that will not be opened for years will disclose the truth about who killed JFK? Now, what they're talking about is that when Jackie Kennedy died, it was announced in the mainstream media that she had left behind some papers, and it's a little unclear on whether it's a memoir or a book or who knows what. But anyway, and she said they are not to be opened until all my children are dead. Okay? Yeah. Now, that tells me that she understands what Ken and I understand, which is, they'll go kill all of them if they have to try to keep the lid on all of this. So she wanted to make sure.
That's why she married Onassis, right?
Exactly. Right. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Okay.
Yeah. Protection.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So Ken, what do you think? Whatever these papers are, when they come to light, do you think we're going to find out, all the details?
I'm always hopeful that when the new file's released, we learn new things because we always do. Remember, after the Oliver Stone movie came out, there was the Assassination Materials Review Board, and a whole lot of files got released at that point, and still a lot, though, are still under lock and key. There was a Washington Post reporter, I forget his name now, but he's still going after some files that have been locked up that actually have to do with Clinton, was supposedly a part of. So the stuff that they're still sitting on has to do with Chrisman and the Maury Island thing.
Right. So that lends a lot of credibility to this tie-in with the FBI, the UFOs, Kennedy assassination. It's really incredible. My take, Ken, is that when all these files are open, everything comes out, these people who are going to be very disappointed when they find that there's not going to be a thank you note from Lyndon Johnson to Lee Harvey Oswald. Okay?
We're not. That's what it would take to convince some people, I'm sure.
I know. I don't think you're going to have any of that because, for one thing, if there was anything really damning, it's already been expunged. It's been whitewashed, swept away, stripped, shredded long time ago. But what
Right.
you're going to find is just more and more confirmation for the liaisons and the connections that are actually already there if you want to take the time and trouble to study the case.
Right. The accumulation of historical detail. Anybody that turns their critical faculties to this historical topic understands that there's a who doesn't is either Gerald Posner or Victor Bugliosi or somebody who's just,
Who's being paid, they're being
Yeah.
paid to say otherwise.
Right.
Yeah.
Or Gerald Posner particularly, remember, I don't know if you followed what happened to him, but eventually he was...
He's been fired and
been fired.
Plagiarism, and also what gets me is he's been charged with just making up quotes from people.
That's right.
So,
yeah.
Yet there's still people who cite Posner as their source for assurances that there was just one lone assassin to Kennedy. Come on.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. He's working for Hamid Karzai's brother now, I understand. That's what Posner's doing. But yeah, these people have long been discredited, and yet they still,
Except for the mainstream media who keeps calling them out as if they're some kind of expert. It's really disgusting to me.
Well, it is, but except over time, except it never works. There's more and more time goes on, more and more people understand that it was a conspiracy. It's very rare to find somebody who believes somebody who's been totally publicly humiliated like Posner or Bugliosi.
Bugliosi. I finally just chunked Bugliosi's book down because I finally got to the 2.5 pages where he had a phony, made-up conversation between a fictitious mafia figure he names Guido and Jack Ruby, and it sounds like a bad script from The Sopranos. hey, Jack, you gotta whack Oswald. I don't know. Go ahead, Jack. You can do it. What's the matter?
Well, yeah.
And it's like, what? What is this? I mean, I'm not kidding you. That's what he was writing.
Well,
and this guy we're supposed to listen to.
Yeah, well, it's that's the picture of reality he wants to. That's really basically he wants to do is write a novel like that, like The Godfather or something. That's what he wants to do, and it doesn't really matter what the facts are. He's just going to create that picture because that's the kind of writer he wants to be.
Well, I've got another question came in here, and we're just about out of time. This is off on a different tack, but this will give us something to pitch around. There's the idea that extraterrestrials aided the Nazi regime in developing all these incredible scientific breakthroughs that they had there at the end of the war, the ME-262, the 3-stage rocket, and I don't know, radar, lasers, Velcro, God knows what all. The question, I guess, it's kind of vague. I'm going to make this in 2 parts. Number one, do you feel like that at least some of the UFO reports in the late 40s and 50s, 60s were actually Nazi craft as opposed to ETs?
Yeah, the guy who really believes that is John Judge, our old pal John Judge, who runs the Coalition of Political Assassinations in D.C. He believes that every UFO is an unidentified fascist observatory. That all of those reports have to do with crafts that were developed by the Nazis. I don't know if I'd go that far, but certainly there's a big component to.
There is a cogent argument to be made that that some of these were Nazi stuff. And so the second part of the question from the caller is that do you think this may be an attempt by the Nazis to try to reconnect with such beings?
Reconnect with the aliens, or these occult creatures that they were dealing with.
Yeah,
I don't know.
What do you think?
Anything's possible. To tie it up to my research, supposedly Chrisman's connection, and the reason Garrison first focused on Chrisman was because he received a letter saying that Chrisman was connected to Clay Shaw, who Garrison wound up prosecuting, and Clay Shaw's role in the whole thing was that he was on the American side of the surrender of Wernher von Braun, that he was one of the people that orchestrated the entire paperclip operation on the American side.
I think there's reason to believe that because Clay Shaw was on the staff of General Thrasher, who was in charge of the taking care of these Nazis, and I think he played a big part in all that. So that very well could be true.
Well, yeah, and all these occult connections and all of their interest in the occult and in the netherworlds and all these strange things, that's real, and it's not like, boom, the end of the war, they're going to forget all that. They're bringing that with them. So, I'm sure a case can be made that that's what they're doing, reconnecting to extraterrestrial or extra-dimensional or occult creatures of some sort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm sure you're aware that most of the major NASA space shots, including the Apollo series, the timing, the date and time of the launches were all set not on any scientific basis, but for astrological connections.
That's absolutely
positions
true.
of the stars. So that's pretty weird because that. And now we're not trying to say that there's anything to that. What we're saying is somebody with enough power and authority to set NASA missions launch dates did believe in this stuff.
Right.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So what's on your plate right now, Ken? What's the latest conspiracy that we need to be looking at? Have you gotten past chemtrails and weather war and all like that?
Well, actually, I think my next project, and I'm only in the beginning thinking stages of it, is a follow-up to JFK and UFO called JFK and LSD. But that's still in the beginning stages.
Well, all right. You need to get a hold of Peter Janney's new book. I think it just came out, and it's called Mary's Mosaic, and it's about Mary Pinchot Meyer.
Oh, yes.
And you'll learn about how that she introduced JFK to LSD, smoked pot, started expanding his mind, and that's when he began to turn from being a post-World War II Cold Warrior to actually starting to think about the benefit of peace to all the people in the world, and that's what got him killed.
Right. Well, Timothy Leary was a friend of mine, and we talked a bit about Mary Meyer. Mary Meyer was one of his graduate students.
Right.
Yeah, and he was actually the one who first kind of.
I think he got her going.
Yeah. So I'll have a bit of that in the book, but that book is a bit way off. I'm still out there pushing JFK and UFO, and anything else I'm doing, people can find out about on steamshovelpress.com. This new book by Adam Gobrightly has this essay that goes through what I was saying before about Route 66 on up until the Route 66 program that was supposed to air on the night of the assassination that was canceled because of the assassination, but it had multiple assassins, just as there were multiple Oswalds in Dallas on that day, and so I've got a whole essay about that and this high weirdness, happy trails to high weirdness, or some strange shotgun with Adam Gobrightly, and that's pretty much it. Steamshovelpress.com. I'm always doing conferences. The announcements all appear. I'm on Facebook under the name Steam Shovel Press, so you can follow me there. And
there you go.
That's it, pretty much.
Okay, so they can get you at steamshovelpress.com, right?
That's right.
And then I'm supposing that this whole list of books you've got, and maybe I ought to mention some of those, Inside the Gemstone File, The Octopus. I really would recommend the Octopus, Secret Government, The Death of Danny Casolaro. Let me think what else we got here. You tell them.
Well, I've conducted a career of traveling around the world, really, and interconnecting with different subcultures. So there are any number of books that document that process. Popular Paranoia is one of them. Popular Alienation. A book called Parapolitics, and these are all essays about connecting to the subcultures that are dealing with kind of parapolitical deconstruction of the world around them. And again, there is the Gemstone File book, The Octopus, There's a book called The Conspiracy Files, which is it's like an encyclopedia type book that covers a lot of individual topics. Amazon, of course, has a page. I've got, we're talking about close to 20 books out there that are available.
What's your favorite one?
My favorite book is usually the current one, but actually the Octopus.
The one you're trying to sell.
The one I'm trying to pitch right now. But the Octopus, because the Octopus I wrote with Jim Keith, and Keith was a personality in and of himself, and it brings back the old days when he and I were working together and having a great deal of fun putting these things out and learning so many things. So I'd say that's my favorite.
That's an interesting topic right there. They told me we've got a couple extra minutes here. Why don't you quickly tell people who may not have even heard of Jim Keith, tell them a little bit about Jim Keith and what happened to him.
Well, Jim Keith Jim Keith and I inhabited this world of zines. I published Steam Shovel Press. He published something called Dharma Combat, and he wrote many books, and he was a very popular author. He wrote Black Helicopters Over America, for instance, and books on the Oklahoma City bombing and things like that. And then he was in the process of kind of exposing the notion that Princess Diana was pregnant when she was killed, and he believes that she was assassinated, and he had his informants when he himself wound up, he died a very early death, officially of embolism in his knee. But
didn't he go to the Burning Man conference?
He went to the Burning Man conference.
And he fell off something.
Fell off the stage there and hurt his knee, and he laid around for a couple of days, and then was brought to the hospital, and he died in the hospital of officially of what was an embolism. And so is that an embolism like a air bubble that you could inject into somebody? Yeah. There's that.
See, let that be a lesson to you, man. Hospitals are for sick people. Don't go to hospitals if you don't have to.
Yeah.
Too many people go in.
What happened? And the thing is, this happened after a procedure on his knee, and at the time, shortly thereafter, those procedures were discontinued across the country because it was happening to a lot of people, The reason the death was tracked down was because they tracked it to a tissue bank that Clostridium bacteria were entering into people's bodies because of parts that were being supplied by a tissue bank near Atlanta, Georgia, which is where Jim's publisher lived, a guy named Ron Bonds, another mutual friend of ours. He used to run a press called Illuminate Press. Mm-hmm. And shortly thereafter, Bonds also died very particularly of Clostridium bacteria poisoning that he received at an El Azteca restaurant right outside of Atlanta. So both of those guys possibly died of Clostridium bacteria. And Keith, of course, had written long ago about the CIA stockpiles of that bacteria. It is a weaponized thing that the CIA uses.
Yep.
So that whole thing comprised, obviously, the Diana assassination theories and the or facts, and Jim Keith's deaths I made those chapters in the second edition of The Octopus. So we kind of expanded the mysteries that Castellero was looking at and kind of engulfed,
Right.
So,
food for thought, food for the conspiracy theorist. But again, conspiracy is neither good nor bad. That just means that more than one person is dealing with a subject. In theory, if you can prove something, it's no longer a theory. And then you have situations like Jim Keith, which is plausible deniability.
Right.
It's plausible that it was natural, but it's also plausible it was not natural. And I guess we'll never know till we get to heaven.
Well, I kind of consider I'm sorry. I don't use the term conspiracy theory often. What I use is parapolitics. That prefix para means to run alongside. It's like the paranormal. Yeah. And it's always there. There's always another explanation. And it's very rare.
Maybe we ought to call it para-news.
Yeah.
It's parallel news. Right. It's the same topic but a different view.
That's right. It's all points of view. It's very rare when the resources are brought to bear that finally put to rest all the different things that any particular event or phenomenon can be. So
Right.
at some point you make a choice, and the point is to make sure that choice is something that you've thought about thoroughly and fairly, and not something that has been foisted upon you by
Right.
by a shallow media or a media that has a different agenda than the truth.
That's right. Of course, then you run into the Curly problem.
Curly?
Yeah, the Curly problem. I stopped to think, but nothing happened. All right. On that note,
well, it does remind me that this, there's a new Three Stooges movie out, right? Speaking of Curly, I hear it's a hit, and also a poke and a slap.
Yeah, it's stupid. I've actually seen it. And
have you really?
Yeah, it's childish and stupid and funny. Okay. And here the clincher is Curly, actually, because if you remember, Curly was the real hoot. I mean, the other were just slapstick. Okay.
That's right.
He was just funny, just standing there. Okay.
That's
and
true.
So I figured the whole thing on this new movie was going to hinge on Curly. If Curly wasn't funny, then the thing just wasn't going to work. And if you'll remember, when Curly died, they brought in several other actors to try to take his place, and none of them ever really worked,
That's right, yes.
But the guy, and I don't have his name, but the guy in the new movie makes it work. It's just, if you like Three Stooges, you'll like the movie. If you don't like Three Stooges, just save your money. All right. On that note, I think
that's the note we'll leave it on.
We'll leave it on that high note. And Kenn Thomas, I want to thank you for joining us this evening. I think this has been a rollicking conversation. I hope the listeners have had as much fun with this as I know I have, and I think you have. And I thank you so much for being with us. And this is your permanent, stable, itinerant, transient, sometimes host on Epic Voyagers, Jim Mars, signing off for tonight's edition. Adios. God be with you.
Thank you for being with us tonight. Please join us again next Monday evening for Extraordinary Phenomena Investigations Council's Epic Voyages. I'm Roger Peacock for Epic. Until next time.